G'day everyone, Prep Aussie here. I hope you're all well in whatever part of the world you're watching this video. Today is Tuesday, the 17th of March 2020, and the time here is 9:57 Australian Eastern Standard Time. Well, folks, plenty to go through. Predictions, non-predictions, etc., etc. So let's go through it. Okay, here's my sponsor, my great sponsor, Totally Rawesome, who make golden activated turmeric paste. If you haven't tried it, and as I said, I try it, I use it, I wouldn't recommend it if it didn't work, and it does work, folks. My family is now fully into this stuff. We just made all the cocoa bombs. Here you go, these ones here. And I ate a couple of these each day as well. Look, this stuff's fantastic, folks, seriously. These guys make a seriously good product. And if you haven't, and you want to, and you should do, is get onto these guys and get some. Okay, there's their contact details. If you want to see them in person, discuss everything, Bundles Farmers Market on the Gold Coast, every 6 till 12, every Sunday. Mobile details there, and info@totallyrawesome.com.au. Okay. Right. Let's go through what I said last week. Sydney was going to go in lockdown, Melbourne, and if you remember, I said whenever Sydney or Melbourne declare lockdown, then the ACT would literally follow within hours. That has now happened. Now look, okay, let's just talk about technicalities here. What do you class as lockdown? And remember, I said they were going to do a ring of steel around Canberra. I still hold to that. Here's what I know has happened. You can't get in and out of Sydney on a plane without going into lockdown. They're now doing aged and disabled shopping, because in Sydney, for some reason, the people in Sydney have got that herd mentality and are just rushing in to buy everything, you know, and stuff everybody else, which is pretty sad. Melbourne, not so much. I haven't seen too much of it going on in Melbourne. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I haven't seen too much of it. But let's just concentrate on Melbourne and Sydney and how that's going to affect everybody. Look, technically, have they come out and said that Sydney's in lockdown? No. But let's just talk about Sydney, for example. Sydney's cases jumped by, I think it was 100 in one night. Now, and I've got to thank you guys for putting me onto him, Dr. Chris Martin. Dr. John Campbell. Anywhere where you have a figure, say it's 100, times that by 10 or times it by 30, whatever you want, that's the real figure that the governments know of, is how many people are infected. Now remember, out of your entire population, if a couple of you get infected, then it's not going to be a big drama. It's the small percentage, right? Now, here's a bombshell. In the whole of Australia, think about this. So we've only got 5 cities, you know what I mean? Darwin, Brisbane, okay, Cairns, Darwin, Cairns, Townsville, Brisbane, Sydney, Newcastle, maybe Wollongong, Melbourne, Tasmania, Hobart, Launceston, Adelaide. You can forget the rest, you know, outside of Adelaide, because it doesn't really exist anything. Perth. Trying to think of anything substantial. Broom's a little place, so there isn't anything outside of Perth really. South of Perth, you've got Margaret River, etc. So there's probably another big hospital there, but I wouldn't go crazy. Out of all of those that I just mentioned, there is 2,000 ICU beds. Think about that. So when this government says they're trying to avoid, they're not. They should have come out and said this from the beginning, and everybody would have been a lot better off. They're trying to flatten the curve, so it's like it doesn't go like this or like that. They've got to be really careful because there's only 2,000 ICU beds in the whole of Australia. Especially, that's even reduced if you take away some of the places I just mentioned, Cairns, Townsville. So there's 2,000 beds in the capital cities collectively in Australia. So imagine, as I said before, what's going to happen if you get even 100 people arriving at each hospital in each capital city on any given day. It collapses the system, the health system. Now imagine if you get 200 to 300 people a day, because that's where this is going at the moment. If these bloody idiots that we've got running the country don't wake up to themselves and shut everything down. All electric. Now think about the knock-on effect here. No dentistry, no elective surgeries, a reduced emergency service, emergency operations. Well, I suppose they have to go ahead, but you've got reduced capabilities. Now, here's the big, and not many people are saying this, and it needs to be said. This is the big, big, big thing that they're shitting themselves about. And it's already happened on the Gold Coast. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say Gold Coast and all those places as well, because we've got 3 big hospitals here. 3 really big hospitals, actually, which is probably more than most places combined on the Gold Coast. So it's great living here with the hospitals and that. You need, now think about this, you need just one person from the healthcare worker, a nurse, a doctor, etc., in any one of those ICU units to come down with this virus, and it is automatically shut down. Then they have to clean the whole frigging thing. They have to isolate all the people. Well, let me tell you what's scary. Yesterday, one of the team from the Gold Coast University got diagnosed with coronavirus. So that's where Tom Hanks was. So now they're shitting themselves because they have no backup staff for that unit, because you have to train everybody, blah, 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 blah. So those people are specialists in that little bit of a field, if you know what I mean. So all those people, 14 of them I think it is, are now in isolation, waiting testing. But see, the problem with the testing is you have to wait 7 days. You can test, but those people might get those symptoms 7 days later. It's a small window. So when you see these, when you think about this logically, right? So you've got 2,000 ICU beds, which are going to get swamped. I wouldn't be surprised if the hospitals are already full, to be honest with you. So, okay, so then what do? You get one doctor, one nurse, one whomever, and all of a sudden, bang, that ICU unit is in disarray. Where do you send the patients? Let me tell you where you send them. You send them home to die. And you lock down the whole family, not to die, because the government knows from China that if you lock down the whole family and you put them in isolation, you may lose 1 or 2 people, but you're not going to lose your entire hospital. So if you're wondering why China and everybody else is sending these people home, they're actually sending them home to die, because they know they're going to die if they're elderly anyway. There's a good chance, 80% chance they're going to die. Now, that's a pretty high average, isn't it? So this is why they're doing this, home isolation, God knows how many people in China died in houses locked in by the government. Who knows? Now, there's an interesting statistic that hasn't come out of China as yet, which they haven't told anyone about, as to how many people below 50 died from this virus, because they haven't really, it's just deaths. As far as I know, I haven't seen anything from anybody telling us how many people below 50 died from this virus. I know it's not a lot, but it's a substantial percentage. So if you're sitting there thinking, I get coronavirus, I'll be all right, it doesn't work like that. So please don't think it's you. You're kidding yourself if you think it is. Right. So going back to my prediction. Sydney in lockdown, Melbourne in lockdown, Canberra in lockdown. That's going to happen. And if you want to be technical, they haven't. Do you see how pathetic our government is? I've got to be honest. It's just ridiculous. You can't have any more than 500 people. I was watching the news thing and the guy said, well, a teacher's in a classroom with all these kids who are super carriers, by the way. They've been identified as super carriers because not many kids die from this. They're carriers. So what happens to the adults? Obviously, they're going to get sick. No one's disinfecting in schools. Parents are going to get sick. Now, here's the thing that the government's worried about stopping schools. The healthcare workers have to go home and look after their kids. Instead of coming out and saying, right, this is the problem, this is what I would be doing in their case, right, this is the problem. If we shut down the schools, the kids have to go home and the parents, who may be healthcare workers, have to go home. So how can you, Australia, help us out? If you know a nurse or a doctor or whatever, can you put your hand up and look after these kids? Yes. Simple as that. Would that not be a more feasible solution than hiding behind everything and saying, oh no, we're not going to shut down schools, we're not going to shut down universities, when here in the Gold Coast, at the Gold Coast Uni, they've had about 10 cases of coronavirus now. And they just keep getting more because the kids keep going back to the uni, and they keep getting infected. It's just ridiculous. You don't have to be Einstein to work this stuff out, folks. And, anyway, right. So technically, have they said there's a lockdown? No. Is there a lockdown in process? Yes. Victoria and ACT, the ACT, 1 hour after Melbourne announced a state of emergency, ACT did the same. Sydney's now got so many cases they can't keep up. And look, whether I said 3 days, 4 days, but I think I said 3 days. They are literally going to shut Sydney down, and there is going to be mass pandemonium in Sydney because there's a bunch of wallies that live there. They're all crammed in like sardines, and they are going to go off, literally. So, when they start locking down mosques and churches and people want to go to church or the mosque or whatever, and they can't go, some of these nut jobs are going to go off. Have a think about this. You got 3 or 4 million people in Sydney now. Now, demographically, when you make a shopping, say a Woolies or a Coles supermarket, demographically, they'll have that shop to service that many people. And then, Coles will have one a block away to service that many people. Aldi's, it's called modelling. They don't open one up unless there's the amount of people that they need to keep the shop going. So you have lockdown. The shops are only open for 3 hours a day, for example, or they might be open for, I don't know, let's just say they're open from 9 till 3, 9 till 5, whatever. You're given that amount of time to get to the shops. What do you think is going to happen? what do you think is going to happen? You're going to see riots and bloody, people just going off because they're too stupid and dumb and greedy and haven't prepared to, do all this stuff. Okay, so that's where that's going. Melbourne, not too sure about. Look, that's the same with any place in Australia, except where the people are a little bit more reasonable. You have a higher proportion of hot-headed wankers in Sydney, so I'm guessing that's going to be more of a problem than anywhere else. Sorry to say that, but that's the truth. That's why I wouldn't live there. If they actually gave me $3 million to live there, I'd give it away to charity. Right, now let's talk about the last two things. Stock market. Was I right or was I right? You don't look, this is not rocket science, folks. Last week, I had a whole heap of things that I was going to show you today, but there's no point. Last week, the Australian stock market went, I think it was 9%, and then it finished up 4% higher. Right. If you're watching this show, then you're pretty switched on. Do you know how much money that is in the stock market? Because it's not like anything you and I understand, or like, this is not financial. I'm a financial hack, so don't think this is financial advice, for God's sake. So you get, and I think it went down, okay, let's say 7, went down 7%. Do you know how much money that is? That's like $100 billion. Say that again. It's like $100 billion, 120 billion, something stupid like that. And then it went from $120 billion down. So all those people have lost their money or are losing money, bleeding money. Some went broke just in that short section, okay? Think about that. Some people went broke. And then it went, and it went past 4%, or it finished at 4% above in the last 90 minutes of trade. Now, are you naive enough to think that that was because of investors? Because if you are, you're bloody kidding yourself. It wasn't. It was the Australian government who bought them. They initiated a plunge protection team to stop the market crashing. On the same day, the Americans did the same thing and they lost $1.3 trillion, or they added $1.3 trillion to their national debt. So your national debt now in America is now $25 trillion. That's the truth. The plunge protection team in America bought $1.3 trillion, or pumped $1.3 trillion into the share market on that day. So they're just cold hard facts. Now, yesterday, the Australian stock market had its biggest fall in history. Even the Great Depression wasn't this big. Or, sorry, it was the biggest fall. Look, I had conflicting reports from different people. You watched ABC, they said it was the biggest fall in history. Channel 9, one of the two. And then if I watched some other ones, they said it was the biggest fall since 1958 or something. Regardless, the Australian stock market lost almost 10% in one day. $170 billion wiped off, almost $200 billion wiped off the share market in one day. America last night lost 13% in one day. So here in Australia, and today's going to be even worse. Here in Australia, you have the undeniable fact that we have gone past what they class as recession area. We're now in recession. There's no two ways about that. And we've lost over 30% in the stock market in the last 2 weeks. I think it was less than that. I think it was 10 days. So I'm going to say that again so you understand how I'm getting where I'm going to. The Australian market, say that's 100%, it went. So we've lost 30% of the money on the Australian stock market in the last 7 to 10 days. And it's the same in America, it's the same around the world, and it's only going to get worse. Now, where's that leave us? Well, if you're already someone who realizes, then your pension fund, if you didn't get it out beforehand, is now worthless, just about. I met someone yesterday who was actually in tears because their pension fund they were going to retire next year, and their pension fund is now not worth paper it's printed on, really. Now, this shouldn't be a shock to any of you guys, because we all knew this was coming anyway. If you're watching this show over the last couple of years, and I take no joy in this, by the way. I've been myself, and I've had interviews on here, Bill Halter, David Morgan, all of them have told you the same thing, that it's economic mother nature will eventually take control. Now, here's something that you all need to think about, apart from prepping. China, right, is lowering its rate of infections at the moment. Right, so China's going to turn around soon and go, wow, we're back on track. And we want all this stuff sent to us from around the world, milk products, etc., etc. Here in Australia, they're going to turn around and say, well, we want milk from our milk factories that we own in Tasmania, in Queensland, or wherever. And we want beef sent to us from our stud farms that we own in Northern Territory. Look, wherever they own, they're going to demand that it starts being sent to them. And countries like Australia are going to go, there's the bird. Don't call us, we'll call you. And that's when things are going to get shitty. But to top that off, and this is going to be the big eye-opener for everyone, China's going to go, okay, we've got our virus things down. We're going to open everything up again. Literally within 1 month of doing that, they're going to have to reverse that decision, because people are going to reinfect everybody, and then it's going to be all guns to the wall sort of thing. Now, just because you're isolating people and you're shutting down the virus, it doesn't mean the virus is going away. It's not like living in a closet somewhere but going, you just need one person again to infect that next person, who infects those next two people, next, blah, blah, blah. So that's the proof in the pudding. You can shut down Wuhan, you can shut wherever you want down. But how long are you going to shut it down for? 6 months? A year? The virus is still going to be there. It's not going anywhere. So when China starts demanding, because don't forget, they have lost trillions of dollars, absolutely trillions, guys, just down the drain, gone. And they're a communist country. So they have to supply everything. I wouldn't mind betting that China has people dying of starvation at the moment, because we're not exporting to them, and we do a lot of food to China. America's not exporting to them. No one, as far as I know, no one's exporting to anybody. So I would not mind betting that you don't start seeing things from China and some of these countries that are heavily dependent on imports, people starting to actually, hey, we need food. And China is going to turn around and do that soon. So if you shut down and you close off 95% of your exports, and virtually 100% of your imports in a country like China with how many billions of people? How many people has it got? 3 billion or something? For 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, where do you get your food from? You ain't growing it off balconies on high-rise apartments, folks. So this is where this is all going. Europe is in lockdown. They aren't sending anything to anybody. Australia's now in lockdown. We're not sending anything to anybody. Ports are in lockdown all around the world. They're not sending anything to China. You got 3 billion people. Who's feeding them? In a communist country, the people are looking up going, hey, I want my food that you're supposed to be delivering to me in the supermarkets, etc. Ooh, big problem. So watch this space. This is where it's all going to get tricky. I wouldn't mind betting in the next week or so, China starts demanding that we send them food. Not asking, demanding. And then you're going to have this whole new problem around the world where people are like, oh my God, these people are starving to death now. And that's going to cause mass chaos, folks. And I'm not trying to hype this up. That's just the cold, hard reality. As much as we've all relied on China for shitty imports of cheap, shitty goods, the payback for China was they got a lot of food and a lot of, vegetables, whatever, meat. They're not getting that. And we're not buying their cheap, shitty goods at the moment. So very soon, and that's why China's so obsessive about trying to shut this virus down, because they need to get staff going again. I don't think they give two shits about the people really, but they need to actually start this process going so they get food and vegetables and meat and back into the country. Seafood. So it's going to get ugly. Okay, just want to talk to you about Australia for a second. Here in Australia, the RBA has now come out and said they're going to start buying Australian government bonds. So that's the Royal Bank of Australia, which is owned by the elites or whoever, who cares, is now going to start buying bonds, Australian government bonds. Now, they're also going to, what's today, Tuesday, they're going to probably buy tomorrow, maybe even today. They're going to drop interest rates, I would reckon, down to 0. Now, when they give those bonds out to people, they sell them or they buy them, there has to be an agreed price for them to be bought back at. That's just how it works. What are you going to get them bought back at? 1%? So these bonds that they're going to buy are virtually useless to us as a country, but they have to buy them to stop inflation taking off. And there's the other rub. I would reckon today, maybe tomorrow, the Australian dollar is going to go below 60 cents. Great for exports. We want to export stuff to China or America or whatever. Realistically, the Australian dollar should be 40 cents to help the country out all the time. But because it's floating, it goes up and down, as you know. It should be set at $40. And we as a country should work with that $40. 40 cents, sorry, 40 cents. And the reason for that is because our exports will be cheaper and we'll be able to export shitloads to every other country around the world and make a good living off that, a great amount of money off that. But there's a problem. If the Australian dollar goes below 60 cents, inflation is going to start kicking in, especially if the RBA doesn't get a grip on the bond market. Inflation is going to go, and the reason for that, not that we're getting a lot of stuff from overseas at the moment, but everything we buy from overseas will skyrocket in price. Bikes, furniture, TVs, everything, white goods, the whole lot. Because we don't make shit all in this country anymore. We get most of it from China. So there's going to be the big problem. So here in Australia, inflation is going to start taking off. What the government does about that is the next interesting point. If they sit on there, if they come out and they say, okay, as of today, bananas can't be sold for any more than $2 a kilo, and there's no price gouging, etc., etc., and we're going to fine you if you do. Great for us, but they're not going to do that because they believe in a free market economy where people can rip each other off. Let's be honest. Have a look at the drought. Drought was, price of hay bales went from like, I don't know, $60 up to 200, 300, 400. But the government didn't step in and go, hey, you're not doing that. So here's my point. Inflation is going to take off real quick. So if you haven't got your goods, this is where I'm going with this prepping, by the way. If you haven't got your goods and services in by now, very soon you're going to be paying another heap of money for that. Let's talk prepping for a sec. We're going to run out of stuff. There's no two ways about it, regardless of whatever anybody says. You only have to look around. They can't keep up at the moment. They have a stock on demand type of process. And whenever somebody turns around, Coles or Woolies, and says, oh shit, we need an extra 200 of those. Well, it's not as easy as that. Now, remember, that 200 that they've extra that they've asked for is going to be taken out of the provisions of the stock that they've already got working at that level. So if it goes like that, they got to take 200 from that. Now you're going to pay the piper down the end of the road because that stock's not going to be there in a couple of weeks' time or a couple of days' time or whatever. And there's no way we can keep production going to keep up for that. So stock on demand is supply chain on demand is what's going to be the killer. Now, have a think about this. Coles, Woolies, Aldi's, whoever, they outsource all their stuff, their deliveries to companies, trucking companies to get the stock in. Now, I don't know, take your pick. Toll. Everybody in Australia knows Toll, and New Zealand, I'm guessing. Toll has 10 guys or 2 guys come down with coronavirus. They have to isolate everyone in that section for 14 days. And this is where this is going to go. Well, those guys aren't loading those crates anymore, and we're not going to get those deliveries. This is all just a common sense approach, folks. This is what the government is not telling you. So, as I said to you the other day, I've spent the last couple of days, me and my wife, and my last week preparing, seriously preparing. And I'm really hoping you did the same. You went in and you got your stocks, you rotated your stocks and provisions, etc., and you've got what you need. Because in the next couple of days, it's going to get ugly out there. By the end of this week, it's going to get real ugly. And you're going to see the divisions within places like Sydney come to life to the point where it's going to shock the rest of Australia. They're going to go, oh my God, who are these people? They're not Australians. Get them out. That's where this is going. And for all of you who are saying that we'll have martial law, how? We have a country of 23, 24 million people in one of the most sparsely populated places on the planet, and at the moment, I think we've only got 200,000 people in our defence forces, not the army, the navy, everyone else. So how are we going to achieve that? Well, technically, the ring of steel around Canberra is going to be the first bit. And once they've locked down Canberra and you can't get in and out of Canberra, and they've got troops on the borders of Canberra, the rest is, you know, as they say, pie in the sky. What are they going to do? Lock down Sydney and Melbourne and then have the troops out in the streets? What, tanks and, you know, the Amtraks, except it's just not going to happen, folks. You might have one or two, you know, Defence Force personnel. You might have the reservists. Now imagine if you're a country like China, and someone said this the other day, and they're sitting there going, wow, Australia's in a really bad way at the moment. Ripe for the picking. And they're not giving us our food that we wanted. We're going to go and get it. You see where this is going if it doesn't get sorted out soon. Anyway, I think I've said enough. I'll leave it there. Let's do the prayers. Okay. Always amazes me, these things. Verse of the day. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. I'm going to read that again. Verse of the day. Therefore, as God's chosen people, not sure who that is, but holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And as always, folks, we'll end with the Lord's Prayer. The Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. Okay, folks, I just wanted to show you one last thing. Hang on a sec. My brother showed me this guy's stuff the other day, and he's been on Greg Hunter's. Is this the right one? Hang on a sec. This is from a guy called Chris Martinson, who's been on, what do you call it? Greg Hunter's USA Watchdog before. That's the, I'll leave a link in the description box, and you can go on his thing. I would highly recommend that you do. Peak Prosperity. It's actually a really good site, and Chris gives you a better breakdown than even John Campbell. And whereas so much he doesn't do the medical, just the medical, he is actually a virologist, epidemiologist or something like that, as well as being he's got like 4 doctorates or something. He's a pretty brainy guy, but he also does the financial, which is really interesting. So if you want to have a really good watch of something, go on Chris's thing and have a chat, or listen to what he's got to say. All right then, I think I've said enough. God bless all. Prep out.